So hello and welcome everybody to this latest seminar organised by the Centre for Book Cultures and Publishing. My name is Sophie Hayward and I'm going to be speaking both to the audience online, hello to you, and also we have a lovely, nice audience here in the room as well. So please be gentle on both sides. But it is my great pleasure today to welcome to our speaker, Professor Anthony Glinoer from the University of Sherbrooke in Quebec, which is a research centre on literary and public cultures and publishing over in Quebec. And Professor Glinoer's work focuses primarily on the history of publishing. So he published in 2005 with Pascal Durand, La Naissance de l'éditeur, the birth of the publisher. And you'll correct any of my terrible translations of your book titles. Also on the study of the representations of the literary life, La bohème, une figure de l'imaginaire social, in 2018, so the Bohemian, a figure, the Bohemian, sorry, is that right? Mm-hmm. A figure of the social imaginary, and on groups of authors and artists, L'Âge des cénacles with Vincent Laisney in 2013. And he's also led the Socius project, which has produced re-editions of the classics in literary social theory, re-edited or with original bibliographies, and also a lexicon of concepts. But today he's going to speak to us about one of his very recent projects entitled the Archives éditoriales project. So without further ado, I'm going to just turn my computer to see, can I ensure that we can, Anthony.
Just keep the computer there, is it possible? Or I can just move the...
Much better idea. I was trying not to unplug anything important. That was my concern, but I think if I do this.
So then we don't have to do anything. I can just. What do I need to do to switch to my?
So to switch, you just.
Yeah, the switch to the PowerPoint.
No touching anything.
Wait,
no.
I'm going back. I went back. I promise you, I won't touch it again. I will do exactly what you tell me to do. I promise.
So to move on the slides, yes. You press this button here.
Yes, and to move, yes, but to move on the website.
You ask me.
Okay. Okay, I will. Okay, hello everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here. Very grateful to the Center for Book Cultures and Publishing, and very, very grateful to Sophie for organizing all this, and very happy to be here. I've heard about your research center quite a long time ago, maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, when I started working on the publishing archives, and I was gathering what I could find. I found that in Reading, in the UK, they are working on publishing archives. There are not so many places in the world, especially because the project I was directing was about the Francophone world. Is it okay?
Okay.
Well, I keep talking while you're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it all right? Okay. Okay. I won't touch, and I'll stop. I'll ask Sophie maybe to translate some stuff at some point, but I'll read my paper in the meantime. Ooh. Oh, see, that's what you need. That's what you need for your.
I mean, do you want to be?
No, I don't. But I think it's fascinating. Never tried that. So it's that's what the CC button is for. Oh, I should know that. Okay. All societies, as you know, have never produced so many archives. Of course, the development of digital technologies that allow for massive and delocalized archives have contributed to this archive inflation, with no longer concerns only documents from institutions, but also archives of companies and individuals. Not only has the habit of keeping and giving away archives spread to many professions and types of activities, But we all participate, as you know, in the production and sharing of information, blogs, articles, social networks, and so on. That requires archiving. At the same time, historical research has become more and more interested in the issue of archives. Reflections have developed on the uses of archives in the contemporary era and on new archival media. But I will talk about publishing archives. If some writers began to bequeath their archives to libraries as early as the 19th century, one of the most famous examples in France is Victor Hugo. Publishing companies only began this practice in the middle, at least in the Francophone world, in the middle of the 20th century, and still in a scattered manner. It was only in the 1980s and the 1990s that the question of the conservation of publishing institutions began to be discussed, both in France, in Switzerland, in Quebec, and also in Belgium for the Francophone. The creation of the IMEC is Institut Mémoire de l'édition contemporaine, so Institute for the Memory of Contemporary Publishing, something like that. That was in 1988, which is a quite large institution and well-funded. And the success that institution has enjoyed since then in archiving and promoting its collection are evidence, I think, of the collective awareness that archives are one of the foundation of historical knowledge, but also of the memory of a society. However, and that's the whole problem, this process was initiated at different times and in different ways in each community, national, provincial, municipal community. So we have publishing archives in many different places gathered in many different ways. And the big question we've been trying to deal with is how to treat them as a whole and as a corpus that we can work with. The very existence of these publishing archives depends on a series of decisions on the part of publishers in the first place, to preserve their historical archives, to archive their present activities, and to deposit all part of their archives in the conservation center. All sorts of obstacles can stand between the donor and the acquiring archive service. The poor organization of private archive is, of course, an obstacle. We were talking earlier about archives that sometimes you can find on the street that are just given away. And that's also explainable by the fact that publishing houses are most often small structures whose archives have either not been preserved, a lot of thrown away over time, or have not often been well classified. Unfortunately, the very limited resources, except for the University of Reading, the very limited resources of the archive services also prevent them from processing as many donations as they would like. So I'll switch now. As you can see, I'm going to switch to like a few different topics.
Oh, okay.
And so I'll talk just a little bit now about historical research and book history in the French Francophone world. Since that book, Lucien Febvre and Henri-Jean Martin, L'apparition du livre in 1958, strange, a discipline that can be dated to one book in one language at least. But since that time, the history of books and publishing has put editorial mediation, the publishing mediation, in the fog. In France and in the French-speaking world, studies on publishers have multiplied because the figure of the publisher has been more than elsewhere, I think, placed at the center of the book world. Over the last half century, publishers' archives have acquired the status of major documentary source for the editorial history of a nation or community. Major book series, like those ones, not this one, I'll come back to that, such as the history of the Histoire de l'édition française, that's the third one on the right, that's in France, or Histoire du livre et de l'imprimé au Canada, there is the book in Britain that you know, of course, and the history of the book in Australia. So those big book series have sought out a wealth of specific information. As publishing archives have been built up, the work of specialists has referred more and more to them and has focused on the activities and strategies of publishing houses. The big name to remember in France is Jean-Yves Mollier. His book has been particularly influential in this regard. In recent years, descriptions of publishing archives have also appeared in some journals that are not dissimilar to the description of writers' archives, which are generally more popular with scholars. That's a new realm, I think, the real description of those archives, and there are few journals now that publish that kind of thing in French. Yeah, those books also, I promised myself to tell something about the one on the right. The one on the left is called Histoire de l'édition littéraire au Québec. So that's the main historical book that's been published like 10 years ago. But the other one has been published very, very recently by my colleagues in Sherbrooke, Marie-Pierre Luneau and José Vincent. It's a historical dictionary about men and women who worked in the book business since the origins up to the 1980s. So it's a big, big volume that's just been published. Very important, very interesting. What I would like to do now is to introduce you to a collective research project on the history of the book and publishing archives. It's been funded by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. And the most interesting part, I think, it's been a partnership project between 2017 and 2022 that brought together researchers and archivists. So that was one of the main objectives, but also challenges. And also people from different parts of the Francophone world. Well, I should say the northern Francophone world, so Belgium, France, Switzerland, Canada. We've been trying to reach some people from different countries in Africa and Haiti. It's not an easy thing. I think it should be a further project that we're thinking about for the moment. But anyway, that project has been focused on North American and European Francophonie and put together around publishing archives. So what I would like to do is discuss the premise of the project and tell you a bit about the research tool that has been developed and some of the results we came to. The project, this is the time I would like to switch to a website, if you don't mind. And at some point, I'm going to go back to the.
Yes.
I'm afraid.
Okay. New share. Ali, do we have a website here? Yeah, we've got it.
Wonderful. So this is the website. I'll leave the image on it for the moment, and I'll tell you more. And I'm gonna visit a little bit the website with you in a moment. So the project, which aims to present, to publish, to reveal, to study, to compare publishers' archives, raised like two sets of questions, I think. First one was how to preserve, peruse, and take inventory of these archives, especially when constant budgetary crises are chipping away at opportunities for archivists to conduct thorough studies of them, which is like a very big, huge problem in Quebec for the moment. There are some money left in the research department for having research projects, but the archives department has been like almost completely defunded in the last 10, 15 years. It's extremely hard for them to get new funds and to treat them. So that's a very real problem we're facing. So that's the first set of questions. The second set was how to create collaboration among different institutions. So university libraries, preservation institutions, publishers associations, research groups. I can show you here, who's part of the, no, that's not the right one. Sorry. So you have the list of the researchers, but also you can see, if I scroll down, the different partners. And in there you can see University of Liège, so that's a research center. University of Ottawa, that's also a research center, but they have archives that are separate from the research center. This is us, University of Sherbrooke. That's the National Association of Book Publishers. So it's an association, almost a new union, but they are very also important to get in contact with publishers, to ask to offer them to deposit their archives. L'Institut Mémoire de l'Édition Contemporaine, IMEC, that I was talking about, and that's a Belgian institution, archives and archives et musées de la littérature. So very different kind of institutions, and the question was how to create collaboration among them, knowing that they have preservation size of varying sizes. The Institut Mémoire de l'Édition Contemporaine is huge, and what they have in Université de Liège is pretty tiny, to make a comparison. Look, varying sizes in several countries with varying archival preservation traditions and institutional requirements, how moreover to encourage not just institutions but also individuals to collaborate. So those were the challenges we were facing. So I'll provide briefly an account of the early days of the research project. In 2003, I don't dare.
What would you like?
The PowerPoint.
The PowerPoint.
I know how to do it, right? I use that all the time with the Zoom, but I won't. Because if I break it, you will never.
It's there.
Yeah, and I'll stay on there for a while.
Which slide do you want?
That one.
That one?
Yeah. In 2003, the research group, I'm a member and now one of the co-directors, which called the GRELC, Groupe de Recherche, so research group about the book in Quebec, has been created in 1982. In 2003, that's what you can see here. The group produced a report designed to evaluate the state of publishing archives in Quebec and in French Canada. That was the goal of that report. And the National Library adopted at that time a protocol to treat those publishing archives. So that there was a great start. And then, well, things were left and a bit abandoned for about 12 years in order to produce the books I was showing you before, those two. And in 2015, one of the co-directors of the research center and convinced me to relaunch the project. At the same time, we just acquired a big, quite massive, considering amount of archives from a very important Catholic publisher in Quebec called Fides. F-I-D-E-S, like in Latin. And one of my colleagues started to do research in there. So I got to work doing all the routine tasks associated with preparing a grant application, acknowledging the dual specificity of the project, partnership among researchers, that was I was telling you, literary specialists, historians, sociologists, and archivists, and finally partnership in the entire Northern Francophonie. The website that Sophie is trying to show you again, maybe. No, she's not.
Nothing around.
Okay, I'll continue. The essence of the achievements are available on the website I'll show you later. And what can we find on that website? First, a geolocalized database of publishers' archival centers. And I'll come back to the question of databases later. So, can I go to the website?
We lost the slides.
Okay, well,
we are going to.
Don't worry about the slides. I'll do without the slides.
No, hang on. Bear as everybody. New share.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so what we can find on the website is that has been one of the main goals, I think, of what we are trying to do is build databases, and I'll tell you a bit later about those. This one, for example. Oops, what is this?
We're looking at the word.
So it's, I don't know, I'm gonna click on where I can click wherever. We've tried to gather, the main difficulty is to gather the descriptions from different kind of fonts and from people who have described the contents of the archival font in very, very different ways. So in some cases, we have very thorough and very detailed descriptions. In other cases like this, we have pretty much nothing. All we know is that in Bibliothèque et Archives Canada, we have some archive from that Marie-Claire Develuis, Quebecois writer. So in some cases, we have very detailed things. In some other cases, we have not very detailed things. All we did is try to gather everything and put that in one big, in several big databases. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that also possible to make research around everything. Some of those fonts were already detailed and localized. That's the case in particular of the Swiss publishing houses. My colleague François Valoton already did all the work to try to find all the different fonts and to localize them. So we just needed to take his information with his member, of course, of the project and put that together. So it's a different kind of situation. So that was the first goal. The second thing we tried to do is show some piece of archive. So that's what we called vitrine, so small exhibitions like this one. That is a research fund, an archival fund we have in Sherbrooke. So as you can see, there aren't so many documents, but a few documents and a short description of what we have. We also organized like exhibitions. I'm going to show you one of them. Struggling with the
On the left.
Yes, I'm trying very much to click on the left. So here is an exhibition we organized in Ottawa and then in Sherbrooke. It moved, and then it became an online exhibition. I think I sent to Ali the reference of that website. So I won't show you everything, but you can have a look. For example, what we did here with small descriptions and document essentially pictures that have been taken and digitalized. And finally, the website or the platform was also a place for researchers to contribute with a blog that we created. Oh, that was not smart. No. That was not a smart thing to do. Why did I do that? It was very stupid. It was on Chrome. Was it on Chrome?
Yeah, it was on Chrome.
Okay, I'm gonna try to undo my own mistake. Can we see that? Okay, excellent. So the last part I want to show you is the blog that we put in place. It's all in French, of course, but as you can see, the idea was to offer the different researchers, students, or profs to talk about, well, one piece of archives, one document that they found that was particularly interesting. So it's not necessarily a full scientific publication, but it's See, it's okay. It's a place to publish like very specific questions. Finally, we came to publish a book that I lost the reference of, but I will find again. Maybe it's this one. It's this one. Called in French Les Maisons d'édition francophones au prisme de leurs archives, publishing houses, seen through the archives. Yeah, say that. So that collective book focuses on the functioning of French-speaking publishing houses as well as on the relationship between publishing houses as revealed by editorial or publishing archives. I've never said, I haven't said yet what we mean by that, and I'll be a little bit more specific. We understand objects and discourses, written images, audiovisual documents produced by publishing houses and preserved by dedicated institutions, such as universities, libraries, and archive centers. They are added to public archives, judicial, administrative, police archive for research on publishing. So there are many other archives to understand the book history. That's one of them. What we did not include in the topics of this book is all the discourses produced by publishers. That's another part of the project, another part of what I'm trying to work on by myself. And some of that has been published in the journal I am directing, called Studies in Book Culture, Mémoire du Livre. One of the issues in 2019 here was about les discours de l'éditeur, the publisher's discourse. So the other book was really specifically about the archives and not what has been published by publishers. I'll just tell you what can. Sometime left, about some of the directions we took in that book. If I can find in a market where few initial resources are needed to start a business, it's quite easy to become a publisher. The most difficult thing for a publishing company is to establish itself over time. Right. In this sense, publishing houses develop medium and long-term strategies, and in many cases, write them down to keep memory of them. If any strategy is by definition a bet on the future, it's even more so for strategies that aim to anticipate the editorial and commercial future of a company. Promotion is often the best documented aspect of editorial strategies, which is why the exhibition I was showing you a little bit earlier was about mostly about promotion. The archives are thus a great source of information on the temporality of a house and its positioning within the publishing fields of its time. The examination of the internal document archives by the houses opens up a field of exploration and problematization concerning the orientation of a house, its formulas, as well as its transformation. These various documents testify not only to what has been, but also to what was to be or what could have happened but didn't. Correspondence, meeting minutes, notes taken by employees or addressed to them keep track of these moments of redefinition. Also, publishing houses do not operate in a vacuum, and on the contrary, they maintain contact with various stakeholders. Before publication, the publisher develops a relationship with the authors who submit manuscripts. Traces of these exchanges can be found in the publisher's archives. We were talking about that before the beginning of my talk. In those of the authors who keep letters, annotated manuscripts, but also other correspondences, diaries, or notebooks in which they comment on the links they maintain with the members of the publishing house. Still, before publication, there are numerous exchanges with other books professionals, printers, graphic designers, press agents, but also the distributor. Before and after the publication now, the work surrounding the press service, the search for reviews and the sale of their work, including the publicity that is given to it, are other operations whose interrogations makes it possible to better define the role of the publisher beyond the material production of the book. Finally, any publishing house maintains contacts with other publishers. Sometimes the houses ally themselves, forming groups or associations, or at least informal networks. At other times, they enter into competition, assert their rivalry, and in the conquest of the market. I'll just give you three examples, show you three examples. I won't talk about Sophia Wood's excellent article. I'll talk about other articles. Just very briefly to show you some of the things we gathered in there. If I can find it here, that's one of them. The article by Florian Moine, who just published his book about Casterman. Casterman was the main publisher of comic books in the 19th, one of the main publishers, the publisher of Tintin, and his article, extremely interesting article about the way the Tintin comic books have been translated and changed in different countries. He has a very interesting image about it was somewhere, I can't find it. Anyway, you'll have a look at the article if you're interested. Another interesting one is has been written by Amélie Toraval. I'll try to find the not easy to navigate in the actual content. Which is about children's book also. Just here. And here it's a very interesting article because it's about a book series called La Joie de nos enfants, 1926, and based on archives from IMEC, the article offers an illustration of collaboration between a small publisher, it's called Georges Cress, C-R-E-S, and a big publishing group, the distributor, which is Hachette. And the challenges for that small publisher. In 1926, Georges Cress was one of the first publishers to entrust the Messagerie Hachette, so the distributor, with the exclusive right to sell his work. Over the 4 years of production of the collection of children's literature, the correspondence between Georges Cress and Hachette reveals an evolution in the relationship and declines many aspects of that confraternity, if you want to call it that way. And one last example from Hervé Séry, which is a French colleague. And his article is about another book series called called Combat, so fight, struggles, created by Claude Durand in 1968. And it's also very interesting because it's in the afterwards of the May 68 crisis. He reanalyzes how that book series was launched and developed in the heart of an editorial space market marked by a political commitment. I wanted to talk to you more about database, but I'll keep that on the side if I still have time later. I just want to okay, no, I'll keep it. Added to the above is to what we could find on the website that I discarded, but I will go back to it. One of the databases is a database of interviews. We have about 1,000 different interviews, mostly taken from the radio or the television. Yeah. interviews with Francophone publishers. These can be, though they can be of various types. Some of them are done in studio, some of them are done in home, at the workplace, by telephone, by email. So you have very different kind of interviews. But we decided to try to compile all of them and also to create new interviews with young publishers. So we have like about 1,000 items in our databases that you can find here, for example. Some of them are way more complete than others. In France, we have the INA, Institut National de l'Audiovisuel, which has like huge archives that are available. So in that case, we could just like research them, and we did a lot, and we have hundreds and hundreds of different interviews. In other cases, like in Belgium, for example, they don't have the same kind of infrastructure. So we have like at least at most like I don't know, a few dozens of interviews that we could gather. And we added new interviews. As I was trying to say, we contacted a journalist called Amandine Glevarec, and she interviewed all these people that you can see there. That's the logos of different publishing houses, always following pretty much the same pattern that I discussed with her. She has her own blog, so she was publishing the interviews on her own blog, but also on our platform. So every time I ask her to ask people, how they started, what archives they have, what's the publishing strategies, and so on. Yeah, the apparently trivial methodological decisions that are involved in the construction of those databases can lead to theoretical and even ethical epistemological questions, right? When we build those databases, how, why, and by whom are such databases constructed? What relations or even negotiations are established between those who design the infrastructure of the database and the researchers who use it, right? And connect data sources or compare them with other textual, iconographics, bibliographical, or archival data to produce new elements of knowledge and new problem questions. Conversely, data that may be or may seem insignificant, and amongst publishing archives there are many, may prove useful later. So the building a database, as we've been trying to do, and I've been trying to do earlier in my career, is quite a serious and difficult, I think, endeavor. Constructing tables, categories, and data sequence is never neutral and always depends on the situated choices of those who implement them. Just to finish in one line, I'd say this: databases and publishing archive, I think, and I'm sure you agree, both contribute to new ways of making book history as an intricate global history that holds together economic history, social history, cultural history, sociology, and literary studies. That's all we call. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Okay, so thank you very much, Anthony, for such a fascinating presentation and a really wonderful panorama of the project, and also of our publishing archives and their kind of opportunities and the pitfalls as well of accessing them, and the question of funding, of course. So what we're going to do now is I'll encourage colleagues online or our listeners online, if you have questions, please do type them into the chat, and we will endeavour to answer them. But I am going to put questions, first of all, to the floor, and bear with me because I will repeat your questions so that those online can hear as well. But do we have any questions for Anthony about his work?
I suppose my question is about organization. You know, this website, it works like a portal, I suppose, because some archives have already their own online presence, so you just link them together, which is something that I think EU portal, archive portals are trying to do as well. but there is quite a lot of work there. I mean, do you have basically a team of people, PhD students are enrolled to this, or is a faculty members that? I'm impressed because it's really.
Well, that's the. Do you want to know?
I
Yes, go ahead.
think Daniela was speaking clearly enough.
No, we don't need to repeat. No. You're fine. Well, so yes, to the first part of your question, indeed, some of the material is already available somewhere on their own website. It's the case of what they have in France. In other cases, they didn't have much like information or publicity about what they're doing or the content of their archives, or even publishing archives were not separated from other kinds of archives. That's the case in Belgium. So what we did is to list what they have as publishing archives and separate it from the rest and advocate. No, to the second part of your question, how could I phrase that? The internet being on, we try to do nothing for free in Canada.
Yeah, well, that's why. So do we.
So since the 1980s, I think the humanities have been like well funded, and including for that kind of project. In this case, it's an interesting case because it's a partnership, which is a bit different from research projects that are also can also be funded. In this case, the money was coming entirely to us, to be very pragmatic about it, but we were able to send some of it to our to the partners. Right, but most of the work has been done either in Ottawa or in Sherbrooke for the very simple reason, which is that it's impossible to send money to hire a research assistant anywhere else. We need to do that in Canada for like work regulations, which makes sense. So therefore, most of the work has been done there, and thanks to the partnership grant we got for 5 years. Yes, it's research assistant. What did they do? They hired someone to build the database, not a research assistant, but an IT worker from the university, and then putting all the data in the database, that has been done mostly either directly by transfer or by hand by students. It's the case for all the interviews. That's all been done by hand. And same for the good part of the work has been done by research assistant that have been like correctly paid.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have another question regarding awareness building, because you mentioned at the beginning of your talk the fact that very often publishers start their enterprise but have no sense of their place in history.
Yes.
It's something that one realizes only when it's mid-road or at the end of the road. So are you also working with publishers in Quebec to maintain an archive,
Yeah, we do. Early on, we had an agreement with the National Library, and as soon as they were contacted to have to acquire a publishing archive, they would contact us. And then things became difficult in the National Library. We're rebuilding that agreement. But yes, that was a big part of the project, was to convince some of the publishing houses to give them their archives, which they do. Oh no, I won't show you, but I'll tell you the story. This is a funny story. So we are in contact with publishing house of poetry, which has been important since the 1970s, which called Les Éditions du Norois. Norois, it's like another way to say north. And it's been publishing very important poetry in Quebec since the 1970s. And we've been contacted by them like already a few years ago. And after a few years, I went to the place they work on. It's not the founders. It's been 50 years, so it's been third generation now. And they had like boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff, literally, that I put in my car and transferred to Sherbrooke. And after that, we spent with the research assistant a good year. You've seen those boxes, working on those boxes. Since we had everything, we didn't have to discuss anything with they trusted us with their archives. So we started like working and play with them and trying to understand different ways. One of the challenges is to find good research questions. It's not easy when you have a like big corpus of archives and with big gaps in between inside them, so we don't know. Finding a good research question is not always easy, but so that's part of it. A few boxes, and then like 3 months ago, I've been contacted by the widow. I shouldn't say the widow because she was very much part of the founders of that company, and she's the widow of the other founder, and they still have boxes and boxes in the wardrobe, she told me, right before Christmas. So when I come back, actually, one of my plans as soon as I come back in Canada is to call her back. She's like 85, so it's not easy to call her, and I'm gonna go to her wardrobe, and she told me, you can just take everything. Just take, because for them it's just like literally no value except for some sentimental value, but not so much because it's all papers that they have like in boxes they don't know what to do with, and for us it's treasures, right? So yes, we are working on that with different kind of levels of results. It's also, most of the time it's a long process. But it's getting there. I think but it's also about raising awareness that those things are important. It's not only because there are writers involved that it's important. It's also important because of what it is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It looks to me like we have possibly questions in the chat, and it's at this point we okay. The discussions about. Okay, do we? Oh yes. Okay, so you mentioned that promotion is often the material that offers some of the most insightful information. I would agree, often crucial for publishers whose archives have not survived or are very incomplete. Have these databases sought to expand promotional materials beyond what the archive actually contains?
Not at this moment. We already have way too much material, but it's of course a very important part. I'll come back to the exhibition I was showing you a little bit earlier, if I can, because in that case, no, I won't touch that. I'll go back to this. In that case, we've been able to use also stuff and material that was in our libraries, including books that were not in the archives but could be shown. I think it's in the other documents in here somewhere. This one is an interesting one. It's
maybe just sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe move that.
Yeah.
Then we can see this.
This has been made by French Canadian publisher that are outside of Quebec, which it's a big deal in Canada to exist as a francophone outside of Quebec. It's not easy, and they have an association of publishers, like maybe 7 or 8 publishers, and they published that document maybe 20 years ago, presenting what they do and promoting their activities. And this was not part of our archives. We acquired it later on, so we are still building this material. But most of the time, what we do have plenty of is promotional material. What we usually lack is the correspondence with the writers or stuff that has been lost, or documents, minutes of meetings, those kind of documents that are very, very interesting also.
See how we. So Fiona Ross, did you encounter difficulties in obtaining permissions to publish the interviews?
Not really. For the ones we initiated, they signed an agreement from the beginning, so it was easy. Here. Especially because Amandine Glevarek, so the journalist I've worked with, has like a very developed network, very broad network, and so she's been able to interview people that are not very easy to interview, and also which was important, people from different associations. That here you can see the Alliance Internationale des Éditeurs Indépendants, so independent publishers, very, very interesting interviews. And the rest of them, it wasn't so hard because they were either on the INA website, so the French website. Let's go on this one, for example. And if I remember that, just, yeah, there it goes to their website. It's just a link to their website. Oops, well, not that one. Yeah, that's also a problem with databases, the way the internet evolves and the database doesn't, right? Because we have money and students to start the thing, but not to, you know, to keep it up to date after 5 years. So I'm sure that like some of the, like that was a good example. I'm sure it's not the only one. A link that's broken has been broken since we started the thing. So it hasn't been such a big issue. What has been difficult is finding and also reproducing, in that case, the interview that has not been recorded either on the radio or on the television, that has been published in journals or magazines. Because then, if those ones, they can be rights on those ones and the publishing rights, and so that might be a bit more complicated. But for the ones that have been that are available, that wasn't such a big problem. It was a very bad example. Just click on the one that was both.
I'll take one last one. Okay. Lovely. Okay. Is the project is limited to French-speaking countries, isn't it?
Well, it has been. That was the one of the starting points, is to try to build something in the Francophone world. That being said, for example, I was talking a bit about the poetry publishing houses, and I've started another project with a Belgian colleague, and that project is meant to become like more multilingual and more international. That raises different kind of challenges. If you do it multilingual, you constantly have the difficulty that you need to find people who are able to speak English, even as badly as I do. Otherwise, well, it's difficult to find translators. It's a difficult situation. If you decide to go only with one language, then you have other challenges, which is that you stay in between people, like the same language, and things could be said and things could be understood in different ways, right? So it's different kind of challenges, which is why we went one way and for the first project and trying something else now.
And the other, did you have I think there was.
Oh, sorry. No. You briefly mentioned finding categories, making situated choices about what you want to know about your archive or your data. I am part of a big a research project where we deal with 25,000 images of text in urban space, also multilingual, and we really thought about how to tag them and what parameters and categories to apply. And then
the more our research evolved, we suddenly constantly realized, oh, we actually want to know this and this and this as well. Can we integrate it? How is that in your case? Do you have that same?
It's always been a problem in this project, but also in previous projects. You know, when.
Tu peux résumer un tout petit peu la question?
Oh yeah, sure. The question was about how complicated it is to keep the database up to date, and considering the fact that the more material you have, the more question it raises. And well, as far as I know, it's always been a problem. And even my first database when I was a student was on Access, Microsoft Access, which is like a terrible idea, but we did that at the time. And the idea was to map the literary field in Francophone Belgium at the time, and we did decide at the beginning to put a lot of categories and variables in the Access database. And even then, after 2 years, we forgot about this, we forgot about that. And of course, it's too late because you can't go back, especially because the funding you got, most of the time you get it at the beginning of the project. So you have funding at the time to put massive amounts of material, and then if you didn't ask the right question in the beginning, it's too late. So it's never easy, and I think it's try and error, and try this like a small scale database at the beginning, see what's happening then, and try a bigger scale. But I don't think there is an easy answer. It's part of the process and part of the frustration, I think, and the necessary frustration of that kind of endeavor, I think.
There's one more question in there.
One more question. Okay. Do you have material related to Indigenous peoples, book history, about editors publishing in their language?
Having published in the language.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the big things we're trying to create for the future. It's important to understand that those questions 15, 20 years ago were raised by pretty much no one. They were already there, of course, but and then in the last 5, 10, 15 years, those questions, especially in Canada, not only in Canada, but especially in Canada, because there's of Indigenous people, very important Indigenous history and terrible history, Canadian history. Those questions became more and more and more important, even if on an archival, in an archival point of view, we don't have many documents, right? That's because a lot of oral history, a lot of has been withdrawn or destroyed by the time. But it is one of the main, I don't even know, like it's more than a trend. It's a new ground that we're trying to build on. It's been like that for the last 5 or 10 years. So we are on the verge of hiring someone in the GRELC who is like a specialist for Indigenous literature, Indigenous publishing. So she's going to work as a research professional so we are developing that. It's completely absent of what we've been doing so far, and it's becoming an important part of what we're trying to do in the future. But it also it says a lot about what we've learned in the last 10 years. I think those questions were just not there. And it's not completely the same with women in publishing, but that also been became more and more important in the last 15, 20 years. And well, finally we're getting there, but yeah, it's late.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one final comment.
Okay. Okay. Because
sure.
yes,
With pleasure.
wonderful.
With pleasure is the answer.
Okay, so I'm going to first of all attend to the Zoom. So stop sharing and say thank you to everyone online for joining us and for your questions, and
Lovely to see you all online. I'm now going to switch off and say goodbye to you all.